All right, welcome to another episode of the 28 to 3 podcast. Today we're going to talk about the Cowboys game and give our thoughts, predictions, scores, MVP, all that good stuff. So I guess now we should be keeping track since we're in week 2, just so we can have a final tally for the end of the year to see who's the most accurate of the three of us.
Keeping track of the picks, you mean?
Yeah. So I think, we all picked a win last week. So we all get 1 point for that. Offensive MVP, I know Corey and I both missed. We both said Taysom Hill. Nick, you said Derek Carr, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I guess we got to give Nick the win on that one. Carr, you got to say, was the MVP of the game, given that it was basically a perfect game. Just very efficient, did exactly what he needed to do.
Yeah, everyone played well, but I think he was probably the MVP, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
I know we haven't traditionally done it, but this is one of those games where you could almost give it to the offensive line if you're going to pick, an MVP.
That's a good point.
Given that we typically go individual players,
I'm fine with using that election going forward.
it'd be Carr, but
I think it should be Carr, given the amount of scrutiny he was under going into the game and the way he performed. Yeah. And it kind of blew away everyone's expectations. So I think you got to go with Carr.
Yeah, and look, I think not a lot of it is being talked about, because everyone's saying Carr outperformed expectations compared to how he played last year, or that pass to Juwan was a great pass, or he put the ball in tight spots, over 80% completion percentage. But let's not lose sight of the fact that he ran, orchestrated, was the captain of the ship of a brand new offense for the first time in a regular season game. And at least from our layperson, non-Clint Kubiak eyes, appeared to do it really well against, again, yes, quote, it's Carolina, but everybody knows their biggest weakness people talked about was their offense, not necessarily their defense. Their defense didn't look good, but Carr ran that brand new offense that he had no experience with going into this year and looked good doing it.
And that's now 6 games in a row at that level, in my opinion. This is so, I know there was a lot of hate last year and we were all disappointed. At the end of the day, they finished 9-8. They missed the playoffs. I think we were all expecting more. He took a brunt of the blame, mainly because of his interactions with media, some of the stuff on the field, getting heated with players on the field itself, with the Olave thing, the McCoy thing. But at the end of the day, for the back half of last year, especially the last 5 games, he was playing at an elite level, not a good level. Though if that would have been the whole season, it was an elite level. And it's continued into this year, which I think you've already seen the tide turn with the fans after one game with him a little bit, and some of the, the interaction with JC Horn and all that. I think he's somehow turned the tide pretty quickly with the fan base, at least a good portion of it. So we'll see where it goes, but that's 6 in a row now, and you can't ignore that when it's 6 in a row. It's not just one game.
It's at least in the right direction. I think just like in the spirit of having turned my brain into complete mush watching that debate last night, just like you have never Trumpers, I think you're always going to have the never Derek Carrers. And
there's a hashtag for that, but we're not going to get into it.
I mean, even people that were harping on having a backup come in were singing Carr's praises, but there will always be people that don't like him, but there were far less of those people after the Carolina game.
For sure.
And I've thought, I think I've always thought a little bit higher of him than you two, but I don't think any of us ever put him in that bottom class of quarterbacks in the NFL. If you just go watch Daniel Jones play football or what Justin Fields did this week, and he's not those guys. He is far superior to that bottom section of quarterbacks in the league, in my opinion. Whether you want to call it the bottom 8 or bottom 10, he's better than that. Now, is his ceiling the ceiling of what we saw the 15 years prior? No, of course not. He doesn't have that ceiling. He never will. But in this offense, you kind of hope he can be at the top end of that middle tier, and we can win a bunch of games with that. Now, do I think we're ever true contenders for a Super Bowl? Probably not. But if he can execute that offense anywhere close to that, this team's going to be better than all three of us thought this year.
Yeah, definitely. So I think for the purposes of this episode, we'll go ahead and say Carr was the MVP, but we will throw out the option of being able to nominate, the offensive line or the defensive line as a whole or any other position group as the MVP. And that will now, going forward. But I think this week we're pretty set on Carr. For defense, I would go ahead and say Alontae Taylor, with 3 sacks. You got to give it to him. So kudos to Corey for making that his selection. Although he did not say 3 sacks. I think, what did you say? You said they would have him rush the passer. And
I think he said a sack.
Did you?
I said blitz. When I listened back to our episode, it did say, I called him for an interception.
Okay.
But I did envision, when I make my predictions, guys, I kind of I can see these guys performing in my head. Like it's like a movie playing in my head as I'm making these predictions. And the movie that I was watching was Alontae rushing across the line several times.
Okay.
Now,
he was
you're right,
MVP,
Max.
for sure.
You're right, Max. I didn't go for 3 sacks, but I did say blitz.
No, we're gonna give you your flowers for this one. You definitely picked the correct player. I think other contenders. Chase Young had a good game. No sacks. I don't even think he had a tackle, but the pressures were there.
Yep.
Honestly, the defense as a whole looked great. So, but we'll go ahead and say Alontae is a clear cut since he's leading the league in sacks right now.
Yeah, he's tied, but that's okay.
Yeah, but well, you know what? Since you, I guess, won last week, why don't you go ahead and start us off this week, Corey? Go ahead and give us your predictions for the Cowboys game.
Okay. Man.
I can see you put a lot of thought in this. If you hear snoring in the background, that's Roman and Charlie. That's not me falling asleep listening to you.
Okay. I'll take your word for it there.
There you go.
Yeah, I just can't. So the reason I'm kind of pausing, I was filling up for gas the other day just to like top off the tank with the hurricane coming. And, you kind of look for, we like to kind of hit the dollar amount at 28.03 on the gas pump.
I've done it many times.
Yep. And mine stopped at 35.27. And we were talking about recording this week. And I was like, 35-27. I was like, that'd be pretty cool if I rolled in and that was my prediction. Saints win 35-27. Like that would be pretty epic.
I mean, if we went off of my gas prices yesterday, it would be like 58-37.
Yeah, well, thankfully I had enough. Yeah. I had enough in the tank. I mean, normally it's like $100 to fill up my tank, but I thought that I was like, that'd be so cool with Saints won 35-27. But in true Lee Corso fashion, I'm going to say not so fast. And I'm going to say the Saints play well, but okay. I just don't. I don't see. I can't predict us to win in this one. I want to, but with the pass rushers they have, and now look, we had 2. The Ultimate PF confirmation bias website out there, PFF, had 2 of our offensive linemen in like the top 10.
Wagner was number 5 in the league, I believe, in pass blocking. Yeah.
So, there's evidence to show from one game that we pass blocked pretty well. But that Dallas pass rush is just a totally different beast. And it's their home opener. Like they played on the road last week. So I just don't see it in the cards for us to pull out a win. But I do believe we'll be competitive. So I'm going to pick Dallas to win. I hate it. I hate doing it. And with the final score of 24 to I'm going to go 24-21. Okay. I think Kubiak at least schemes it up pretty well and at least gives us a fighting chance. I think we're going to run the ball a lot better than people might have expected. But 24-21, I think your offensive MVP in this one, I'm going with Taysom again. I'm going back to the well because Kubiak's going to have to scheme up ways around that pass rush. So look for him to get the ball out to the perimeters quickly, screen plays, bubble screens, Taysom over the middle, stuff like that. Over the middle passing or running up the middle, who knows? So give me Taysom with about 80 total yards and a tutty. And defensive MVP. In this one, I'm going to go with Paulson Adebo. He's going to have to rise to the occasion in this one with CeeDee Lamb. He's probably going to be targeted a good bit, regardless of where he lines up. And I just think he gets his nose in there in this one. He's seems to have done pretty well when we have big games, so I like Paulson in this one. Multiple pass breakups. Give me one INT.
Okay.
Because it is Dak. It is Dak Prescott, after all.
There you go. I'll go next. I'm going to go ahead and say Cowboys win this one 21-20. I think we are very competitive. I think it's close the entire game. I do think they pull it out at the end. As you said, they are at home. It's the home opener. It's a very tough team. You know, their strengths on defense line up with our, I guess, perceived weaknesses on offense going into the season. So until I see our offensive line stand up to this type of pass rush, I'm going to have to err on the side of caution and say that the Cowboys are going to get the better of us. But I think we will be very competitive. I think Carr has another good game. I'm not going to say he's the MVP. I'm going to run back my selections from last week. So I'm going with Taysom Hill.
You're joining me. God.
Yeah, no, I'm going with Taysom as the offensive MVP, pretty much for the same reasons you laid out. I do think, you know, he's probably our most explosive option out of the backfield. So I think you're going to see him. He didn't really do as much last week as you and I both thought he would do. But I think this week, you know, it feels like 80-ish total yards, just like you said. But I'm going with 2 touchdowns out of Taysom.
Ooh. Okay.
And then I'm also running back the defensive selection. I'm going to go ahead and say Chase Young. This time, he turns those pressures that he had last week, the 6 or 7 pressures, whatever it was. He turns a few of those into sacks. So I'm going with 2 sacks out of Chase Young this week.
Okay.
Okay.
What you got, Nick?
I agree with most everything he'll say. I don't think Dallas is a great home team. I don't think that's a huge deal, at least over Dak's tenure. They haven't been like dominant or anything at home. I did watch actually a big chunk of their game. The defense is frighteningly good. Deshaun Watson's terrible, but that defense, they ate his lunch. It was bad. He was something like 0 for 15 on throws over 15 yards or 15 yards in the air. He didn't have the time to make a throw 10 yards down the field.
I was going to say, it's clear that he's bad, but how many times have we also said, that defense made that good quarterback look horrible?
Right. Yeah, but he hasn't looked good in a while.
And I text Max on the side. We were kind of talking about some fantasy stuff, and you know, he was like, "Man, the Amari Cooper's year." And I said, "I don't know, man. He could not get anything off, even if it was so quick, that pass rush." So they look dominant. On the other hand, the offense did not. If I'm being honest, they played controlled and they played smart. But they struggled a lot. That offensive line did not look good. The running game did not look great. Dak was okay. I think they have offensive line problems too. I think we might be looking – I liked where y'all put the scores because if you base it on last year, you would see Dallas with a much higher score line even against our defense, probably, the way they scored last year. I don't think they're the same offense as last year after watching that. I mean, the Browns is a very good defense, don't get me wrong, but – that offensive line's not the same. So I'm in the same ballpark on the score line. I do think, you know, I wonder how much Kubiak's offense caught Carolina off guard too. You know, there's not a lot of tape on him specifically. Obviously, his style of offense is plenty around the NFL. But when I look at the team, I think this is fairly close. I still think they have a better roster than us. I think they have superstars and we have stars. We don't have Micah Parsons. We don't have a Diggs. We don't have a CD. We don't have even
Ron
Dak.
Bland. There's
Marcus Lawrence.
Right. I mean, they're loaded. So
Yeah.
that's a better roster than we have currently. I really like a lot of things we're doing with the roster, but as of today, that's a pretty loaded roster. So I'm in agreement. I think it's a Dallas win. I think the score stays fairly low, and by that I'm in the same ballpark as you guys. I'm gonna say we score 20, and I'm gonna say they go 27. I think the line's actually 7. If I had to bet that line, I would bet the Saints. I think
That's higher than what it opened up. I think I saw it open at 6.5.
Yeah, 6.5 is what it was.
I've seen it. Yeah, it's toggled. I think it's toggled back. But either way, I'd still take the 6.5 probably if I had to bet this game. I think it's a closer game than a touchdown. It should be. But
Agreed.
I'm going to say 27-20 anyway, just because I think maybe we stall out on a couple drives and they get one more touchdown than us, and that's where it shakes out.
I was going to
offensive MVP.
Yep. I'm going to say your gas price, but
offensive MVP. I'm going to say it's AK, and the reason I say that, kind of the same thinking of y'all on Taysom. To slow down that pass rush, the only thing you can do is run the ball. So you're going to have to get that pressure off. So I think he probably gets more touches than last week. I think Taysom gets way more touches as well. And then we try and play action off of it if we have some success in the run game to try and, slow that down just a little bit. So I'm going to say it's different than y'all, but for the same reasons. I'm going to say AK has 110 total yards and a touchdown. Defense, because of what I said, I think the offensive line look like. I think you have to pick someone on the defensive line here. I think there's going to be opportunities for sacks. So I'm going to stick with Young also with 2 sacks. And I think we have the potential with some of the blitz packages, as long as we can keep CeeDee Lamb in check on those quick routes. This could be a 5-sack game for the defense and keep this game really close and competitive. But again, I think they're a better team than us today. Still, even coming off the great performance, that's a team that's probably going to be in the playoffs for sure. And we're trying to prove we belong in contention for the playoffs right now. That's where the two teams are for me.
Well, it looks like we're all pretty much on the same page with how this game's going to play out. So I haven't seen us in this much of agreement going into a game in a while.
This is weird. What do we all like? Can't speak for Nick, but I mean, we worried about this storm coming through. Are we in hurricane mode, or I mean, we got no disagreements here.
Yeah,
it's a big game, though. Honestly, too, if we are, let's say we're better than we all thought, and let's just say we're a couple games better, and we are a playoff team. This all of a sudden, second week of the season, will be a huge game in tiebreakers. If they're able to somehow pull it out, my optimism for this team would go up. It hasn't changed a ton from when we started the season, except that Kubiak clearly does know what he's doing. We saw that, and it looked way better than we thought. But I still think that might be the worst team in the league that we beat. So I don't want to give it too much credit, but you just don't score 47 on people in the NFL. You just don't do that very often if you're not a pretty decent offense.
Right.
Agree.
And the defense did their job too.
Yeah.
They looked like we thought. Right.
Yeah, this game kind of reminds me of the Packers game last year where, like Nick said, I feel like there's going to be a lot of playoff ramifications, whether we make it or not. I still feel like we're going to look back at this game as a pivotal point, one way or the other, just depending on how it shakes out. But with that, unless you guys have anything else to add, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode.
Yeah, no, I think it's good for the new format, quick hitting game predictions. So
yeah, definitely. So going forward for the weekly previews, we're going to go ahead and keep these around 15 to 20 minutes. Little quick hitter, get the predictions in, and we'll talk more in depth about it on the review episodes. But with that, Thanks for listening to another episode of the 28-3 podcast. Who dat?
Boom.